Margot Vane had already circled the rejection on the audition sheet in red ink when 12-year-old Nadia Okafor walked out of the studio, spine straight, chin level, refusing to let a single tear fall until she reached the hallway where she assumed no one from the academy could see her anymore. Margot was 54, the director of the Ellery Vane School of Classical Ballet, an institution her own mother had founded and that Margot had spent 3 decades protecting with an exacting, uncompromising eye for what she called the line, the precise proportion of limb and torso that classical technique, in her rigid interpretation of it, demanded. Nadia had executed every combination in the audition with technical accuracy Margot rarely saw from a 12-year-old, extensions clean, musicality instinctive, rather than taught. But Margot had watched the girl's frame move across the floor and made a decision before the audition had even finished, the way she always did, based on a measurement no amount of talent could overturn in her mind. "She's talented," Margot told her assistant afterward, sliding the rejection sheet into the stack of declined applicants without a second look. "But her build isn't correct for the company track. I won't set her up for a rejection at 18 that we could prevent at 12. What Margot did not know, and had never once asked, was that Nadia's father, Samuel Okafor, worked as the school's night custodian, mopping the same studio floors his daughter had just been told her body wasn't right to dance on, and that he had taken the job 3 years earlier for exactly one reason, so that Nadia could watch classes through the studio windows after hours, absorbing technique through glass, because there had never once been money for private lessons. Before we continue, if you believe that talent has no measurement and grace wears no required shape, please like this video, subscribe to Kindness Tales, and share this with someone who needs to believe in people again today. Samuel had been a dancer himself, once in a company 2 states away before a knee injury at 26 ended a career that had barely begun, and before his wife's death 4 years ago left him raising Nadia alone on a custodian's wage that covered rent and little else. He had never told Nadia the full extent of what dance had once meant to him, worried that his own unfinished dream might weigh too heavily on hers. But he had watched her night after night, through the studio glass, mimicking the older students' combinations in the reflection of the darkened hallway windows after everyone else had gone home, and he had understood, with the particular certainty of someone who had once had it himself, that his daughter carried something rare. Nadia did not tell her father about the rejection immediately. She sat with it for 3 days, quiet in a way that worried him more than tears would have, until he finally asked directly, and she told him everything: the audition, the clean technique she knew she had delivered, and the 2 sentences Margot Vane had said to another instructor in the hallway afterward, not realizing Nadia could still hear through the door. "The technique is there. The body isn't." Samuel said nothing that night that would undo the decision, but he did not stop unlocking the studio for her either. 3 evenings a week after the school had emptied and before his shift technically required him upstairs, he let Nadia into the main studio, the one reserved for company track students, the one she had just been told she didn't belong in, and she danced there alone, in the dark, with only the security lighting and her father sweeping quietly at the far end of the room, pretending not to watch every single movement. It was on one of these evenings, 6 weeks after the audition, that Margot Vane returned to the building past 10 o'clock, having left an important folder of donor correspondence in her office earlier that day. She let herself in through the side entrance, expecting an empty building, and instead heard music drifting faintly from the main studio. Not a class, not a rehearsal, just a single piano recording playing to what she assumed was an empty room. She almost walked past. It was Samuel's mop bucket sitting outside the studio door that made her pause, curious about why a custodian would leave a studio light on after hours. And when she looked through the small window in the studio door, what she saw stopped her completely. Nadia was dancing alone, unaware of any audience beyond her father, moving through a combination Margot recognized as far beyond what any 12-year-old should have been able to execute without formal training. Not the careful precision of a rehearsed audition piece, but something looser and truer. Technique that had clearly been absorbed rather than drilled. Delivered with an emotional honesty Margot had not seen from a student that age in years, if ever. The girl's body, the very proportions Margot had rejected 6 weeks earlier, moved through the space with a musicality and control that made the measurement Margot had once considered disqualifying look suddenly almost irrelevant. Margot stood at that window for 11 minutes without moving, watching a rejection she had made with total confidence dissolve in real time. She opened the door quietly during a pause in the music, and both Samuel and Nadia turned, visibly startled. Nadia's first instinct clearly to apologize for being somewhere she'd been told she didn't belong. "How long has she been dancing in here after hours?" Margot asked, her voice carrying none of the clipped authority it usually held. 6 weeks, Samuel said, stepping slightly in front of his daughter out of old protective instinct. "I'll take responsibility for that. It won't happen again if it's a problem." "It's not a problem," Margot said, and something in her tone made both of them go still. "I need to ask you something, Mr. Okafor, and I'd like an honest answer. Did you train at some point? What I just watched wasn't only her instinct. There's technique underneath that instinct that came from somewhere specific." Samuel was quiet for a long moment before he answered. "I danced professionally for 2 years a long time ago before my knee ended it. I've never had the money to give her real lessons. I've only ever been able to give her a window to watch through, and whatever I remembered, well enough to correct when she got something wrong." Margot looked between the two of them. The father who had spent 3 years mopping floors so his daughter could learn through glass. The daughter who had absorbed an entire technique through nothing but watching and repetition and a father's quiet corrections, and felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel about a decision. The specific, uncomfortable weight of having been completely wrong. "I made an error 6 weeks ago," Margot said. "I evaluated a measurement instead of a dancer. What I just watched through that window is not something a rejected body produces. It's something a gifted one does, regardless of the line I've spent 30 years insisting on." She turned to Nadia directly. "I'd like you to re-audition. Not because your father asked, and not because I feel guilty standing here. Because I watched something tonight I have not seen from a student in this building in a very long time, and I don't intend to lose it over a rule I'm no longer certain was ever correct." Nadia's re-audition, held privately the following week, ended with Margot offering her not just admission to the company track, but a full scholarship, funded quietly and personally rather than through the school's usual channels, along with a private acknowledgement to her senior faculty that the Academy's evaluation criteria needed revisiting in ways that went well beyond one student's case. Samuel kept his position as the school's custodian for 2 more years, watching through the same studio windows, except now the door was never locked to him, and the mop bucket sat forgotten in the hallway more evenings than not, while he watched his daughter train in the room he had once only been allowed to clean. If this story moved you, please like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Kindness Tales for more stories of courage, grace, and the small human moments that change everything. And tell us in the comments, has someone ever measured you by something that had nothing to do with what you were actually capable of?